Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining this Heritage Foundation Facebook Live. Well, we're back with Nick Loris, who is our expert in energy and environmental policy, because it's cold outside. It was much colder this weekend, which is why Nick doesn't really need a jacket right now. It's kind of warm. It's a warm 35 degrees out here now. But this past weekend, much of the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic states experienced a bomb cyclone, which some people are calling a climate crisis. Former Vice President Al Gore actually took some heat for claiming that the icy storm is exactly what we should expect from a climate crisis. So, Nick, what exactly is this? What was the bomb cyclone? And is this something that we, could have anticipated if we were looped into global warming?
Yeah, it's not a new phenomenon. In fact, we have around 50 to 60 bomb cyclones every year in the northern hemisphere when you have this intersection of cold air coming from the west and warm air coming off the oceans from the east. And it forces the barometric pressure to drop very quickly in a matter of 24 hours. The reason we don't hear too much about them all the time is because out of those 50 to 60 per year that we see in the northern hemisphere, most of them happen in the ocean. So it's not a new phenomenon. It's really, this is winter, and we're going to experience cold spells, whether we have increases of greenhouse gas emissions from industrial activity or not.
And for those who are saying, still saying that global warming exists, shouldn't we be seeing warmer temperatures, or what does that mean that we're seeing something cold now?
Yeah, you have to look at things over long-term trends, and so we're going to have cold spells, we're going to have heat waves, and not pinpoint specific events on global warming or climate change. The way that a lot of people on the left have said that, this period of 5 days of heat is evidence that, we're headed towards a scenario where catastrophic warming is imminent, or that we're going to have more wildfires or droughts or floods. We have to look at long-term trends, and that's what's important to look at when it comes to temperature changes. That yes, we've experienced warming really over the past century and a half, but over the past 25 years or so, it really hasn't warmed as much as the models have projected it to warm, and therefore we're not headed toward this catastrophic warming that a lot of doomsday climatologists project.
Now, and some are saying that warming is causing the jet stream to meander in a particular pattern that causes these cold spells. So, they're giving these facts, lifting this theory. Is this in any way giving us room to doubt or disagree with scientists who know what they're saying?
Yeah, not really. There's different patterns of jet streams of air. So when it flows from the west to the east, it can flow in a number of different ways, kind of straight like a river. It can have troughs and peaks, and that can change how temperatures change over time. And it can also meander, is what some of the climatologists are projecting. Kind of if you think of water flowing from a river into the ocean, it kind of sits in that delta area for a little while. But again, nothing of that nature is new in this scenario. This has been happening in some instances for a long time now. We're not seeing any frequency or intensity of these airflows meandering in ways that are causing more cold spells. And so trying to tie these extreme cold events, whether it's been nor'easters, whether it's been this bomb cyclone, whether it's been the polar vortex in 2014, isn't borne out in the data of more frequent and intense natural disasters or more cold spells over time. The trends are actually showing decreases in these extreme cold spell events for all three of those things.
Right, and the National Snow and Ice Data Center actually says that ice growth during the November 2017 month averaged 30,900 square miles per day. And a lot of that is contradictory to Al Gore's Oscar-winning documentary An Inconvenient Truth, where he really didn't talk about record cold and increasing snowfalls. It was all about the melting ice caps and man-made global warming. So could you give us some examples of maybe some bad policy that we've seen from this extremism that we see on the left about, climate crises?
Yeah, and to your point about the polar ice caps, that's one of the big problems with this debate is people point to a single isolated event like Hurricane Katrina or a bomb cyclone and say we need action on climate change Usually that means restricting the use of affordable, reliable power and getting rid of fossil fuels. There's been a huge drive from the left to eliminate the use or significantly curtail the use of coal, oil, and natural gas, which provide 80% of our power needs. And so when you restrict the availability and the use of those resources, you're going to drive electricity prices higher for American families and businesses. You're going to drive home heating bills higher for American families, and you're going to drive the price at the pump higher. All of those things are resources and money that could be used elsewhere in the economy for their families, on food, on healthcare, on education, and wouldn't do anything to mitigate global temperatures anyway. So you're taking money out of the pockets of hardworking Americans in terms of driving energy prices higher for no noticeable impact on global temperatures anyway. That's what we've seen with attempts at cap and trade legislation. That's what we've seen in the Obama administration with the Clean Power Plan and all of the climate change regulations on power plants and on vehicles and on big businesses. That's problematic because those regulations, the costs of them are passed down onto the consumers and were hurt for no real impact or benefit that we would see.
Now, for those who might not know, could you fill us in a little bit more on the Clean Power Plan and what that was and why it was a bad idea?
Yeah, sure. So when cap and trade legislation to restrict CO2 and other greenhouse gas emissions failed, President Obama effectively said that there's more than one way to skin a cat. I'm going to use my power in the unilateral way through the Environmental Protection Agency to regulate CO2. And one of the hallmarks of his climate plan was the Clean Power Plan, which would limit CO2 regulations on power plants across the country. This, again, would have significant costs if you're going to restrict the amount of power effectively that a power plant can produce. You're going to drive up costs. Fortunately, it was stayed by the courts and it never went into effect. And now the Trump administration scrapped that plan. They're rewriting their own. What that looks like is really anyone's guess at this point. They're still very early in the stages. But the fact that we don't have an administration that is so hell-bent on restricting the use of fossil fuels is great news for Americans who like affordable, reliable energy.
And I think it's only natural for people to be concerned about the future and future generations to come. And so is there anything that we should be doing to safeguard our planet and make sure that it does, stay around for generations? Or can we predict anything? Is there anything that our federal government should really be doing to help us in that way?
Yeah, well, I think we do a lot already that often goes unnoticed. I mean, America has a very impeccable environmental record when it comes to breathable air, when it comes to drinkable water, when it comes to pollutants that are known to have adverse impacts on human health and the environment. Those pollutants have been going down for years as a result of innovation, because when businesses innovate and invest in new technologies, they're going to drive emissions down. Part of it has been because of regulations through the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act. The question we need to ask ourselves today is, are the regulations that have been implemented actually achieving any meaningful environmental benefit? And a lot of senses that's no. So it's not just looking at the costs, which are often exorbitant, but it's also looking at the diminishing marginal returns in terms of environmental benefits. When it comes to climate change specifically, again, I think this is an area where we need to look at the science, to look at where the trends are going, and to look at the costs and benefits of the policy. And there's a lot of climatologists who suggest that, yes, the Earth is warming. It has warmed for, again, about 160 years now as we've come out of a little ice age. But that doesn't mean we're headed to a scenario where the coasts are going to be flooded and we're going to experience more extreme and frequent natural disasters. So let's look at the data and look at the scientific reality, and then let's look at policies from a cost-benefit scenario, whether they would actually protect against a changing climate, rather than implement regulations that are more based on a political agenda and political philosophies that we need to get away from fossil fuels that, again, are so important to America's health and well-being and prosperity, and not to mention the world's health and well-being and prosperity, and focus on looking at those costs and benefits rather than implementing things on a political agenda.
All right, well, thank you, Nick. I'm sure we'll be speaking to him again once it starts warming up and people say it's warming up too fast or getting too warm.
That's right.
But we're going to head back inside since it is cold out here. We really appreciate you all joining us today. Be sure to check out heritage.org for more on our take on the policy issues. See you next time.